So from a speech and language pathologist standpoint, how do you go about this? Like, from an SM standpoint. And then I want to get into the whole bilingualism aspect and multilingual aspect of this. But like when you're thinking about it, you talk about the brave muscle, aspect. So tell us a little bit about that.
So although I am an SLP, so a speech and language pathologist, my approach is grounded in brain development, and it's just something that I've always loved. So I see that communication is more than using words. And that's why I always say selective mutism is more than the fear of speaking. But this is what people see out there. Because as human beings, this is what we do best, right? I see that communication from a child's point of view is a whole body, is a whole way that the child is positioned. And they're able to show us how they feel. Do they feel safe? Do they feel connected? Do they feel co-regulated? And as a speech and language therapist, the first thing that we know that develops is good eye contact and reciprocity and playing. That is the beginning of communication. So I integrate my approach from the neuroscience, from rhythmic movement. I love Daniel Siegel. I love so many of the people that I studied with. And, often people say, oh, you're a little bit unusual. You don't focus mainly on speech, because I totally believe that children need to feel regulated in order to play with us, in order to laugh with us, in order to emit sounds, and then so on and so forth. So language, after all, is definitely more than words. And if a child can connect with us, or a teenager, or even an adult, then they feel safe, they feel seen, and then the larynx will relax, and then more sounds will come on. So that's really mainly what I focus on.
I think you articulated it really well. And it's interesting because when you work with this population, you may come at it from different perspectives, and for me, coming at it from a physician standpoint and understanding why you have a symptom, and then, why is that there? That is what dictated my whole process of understanding SM as a social communication anxiety. And basically, you're using a lot of like similar thoughts as I do, like basically comfort, connection precedes communication. That's in line. And that they have to feel safe and regulated. That's in line. And that it's a whole person approach, basically. So I don't treat to speak either. I treat to I understand to be able to treat. And in order to really be successful with this population, as you're sharing, you've got to understand that person. It's not just treat to speak, because how many families do you see, probably like me, that come to us going, I was seeing a therapist and the focus was on talking and my child was shutting down and now she's more avoidant and I'm really frustrated and I really want her to speak, speak, speak. And I'm like, stop, let's stop. And so much of our work, it sounds like, is similar in the sense that we're really trying to understand that child or teen and and adults, helping them feel safe, helping them understand. And what you said, I loved, which is the look, listen, and learn. And that's what you're doing too. You're looking, you're listening, and you're learning. And so much of what they're saying is nonverbal.
Absolutely. Do you know, but as a speech and language therapist, the same approach applies. And that's what I used to teach at university. Even if you're treating a speech and sound disorder, then although children are not necessarily scared of talking, they don't really know what to do with their mouth. But equally, they still need to feel safe and secure to try to articulate and move the tongue in a certain position. Now, kids with SN not only have that, because they don't really know, because the fear kind of stops them. So that's kind of more the motor aspect of it. But because I'm a speech and language therapist, it comes with a baggage that they focus and they go, right, so that's what you do. You can fix my child's speech, right? And I feel that you and I have that bridge, that we really want the world to understand that communication can be done through looking. And one of the first things that I always teach parents is think about even exchanging. So paying or laughing whilst in the supermarket, that's communication. But it takes me a while for them to trust me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right? Social engagement is the precursor to communication. And that's what I was going to say. The whole handover, the takeover, the front line, and giving them the opportunities and respecting their sensitivities that many of them have, not going to Target at 2 o'clock, but maybe practicing at an off time. There's a lot of overlap there. And, one of the things that, as you know, because you listen to me a lot, is that I always want to understand what are the factors into the development and maintenance. And I feel like I say that so much, but it's so true. And, the topic I thought we could talk about, and as I shared, we can always do more topics, right? Because of the depth of your knowledge and interest, we certainly can always do more, is the bilingualism and multilingualism aspect to SM. Because not all kids are bilingual or multilingual, but that's a specific subset of the population that we cannot ignore. There's a
Absolutely.
cultural aspect to it as well, but the actual language. So, would you share with us your experience in working with bilingual and multilingual children with selective mutism?
Absolutely. I am a multilingual therapist myself. I brought my children to be bilingual, Italian English. And as I said to you, my daughter, who's now 17, has a bilingual experience. And she understood in her case and spoke Italian really well because that's the language that my parents spoke to me. But every time, because we've always lived in Scotland, every time we went to Italy, she would fall into silence. Not because she didn't know that, and she had the world around her that constantly told her, "Oh, doesn't your mom speak Italian to you?" So that was the assumption. And she used to get really upset about that because Italian was very much a part of our life. But she didn't feel confident using Italian with people that she didn't know. And obviously, she was very anxious. And that experience really has profoundly shaped the way I work and support bilingual children and their family. And I really want to, both for the children and the family, to build resilience across the languages because bilingualism or multilingualism doesn't necessarily mean that you're speaking a lot of languages. Is about how, where do you feel that you can speak that language? And it's very much a family dynamic because every bilingual or multilingual family will be different, as we will explore today.
Oh, for sure. There's so many different types. There's families that speak multiple languages and then combine the languages, right? And then there's families that speak one language and their cultural aspect, even their nonverbal, their body language. And then the child goes, let's say, into an English speaking preschool and is only speaking Spanish at home and feels uncomfortable, we can talk about. But then there's the family, let's say the English family, that moves to, let's say, Yugoslavia, another country. And now they're in a whole nother country going in with only English and then putting into a school that's speaking a different language. So there's all different types.
Absolutely.
And some of these children may have otherwise. So the bilingualism, may have been an impetus, but sometimes a lot of them have otherwise the timidity, the sensory issues. Maybe they have other challenges going on too that we have to kind of decipher. But, one of the things that stands out is, how do you determine when these symptoms are anxiety based or it's due to their inability to understand the language? How would you tell our listeners to differentiate that?
So here is very much about quantity and the way that the child uses language. Because as a speech therapist, in order to determine a speech and language delay or a speech and language disorder is very much about how much language does a child have. And that's why we start kind of looking and analyzing how is the language used within the home. So that's why, I always begin with, conversations with parents without the child present, because I want to understand how exactly, as you were saying, how do they use the language at home? Is it the OPAL, one parent, one language? Is it situational bilingualism? Or I would like, which I have a lot of them, in Italy, they really love their children to learn English. So they teach them English whilst they play, but they're not necessarily English speaking. And, first language, English is not their first language. So when a child has a language delay, they would always try but the language doesn't come as fluidly as we would expect. There are some parts that they are missing, or they're not quite saying quite well. They're quite willing to imitate, and imitation is one of the most important skills for language development. But and don't get me wrong, you can have both. I don't come across a lot of them, but when there is the anxiety, there is you can see them that they can't imitate. They find that process really hard. They freeze. They are quite rigid. You can see them on their breathing, the way they play, they don't look at you, all the things that we've talked about physically before. And they engage in a very quiet and different way, because a child that doesn't have language doesn't necessarily mean that they find communication difficulty and hard. So they would point and they would, they would do all sorts of things. But a child with SM would also find pointing or sharing quite difficult. And the curiosity is also dampened by that sense of insecurity and the freeze response that they have.